bespoke radio for the masses.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
If the game is rigged, change the game. Game changer.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
This is Fade to Black with your host, Jimmy Church, on the Game Changer Radio Network and KGRA, the Global Radio Alliance.
I need your help to get to the year 1985.
You're listening to Fade to Black with Jimmy Church on the Game Changer Network.
Good evening. Fade to Black. Bespoke radio for the masses. How you doing? It's Wednesday, February 19th, 2020. 50 days into the new year, only 316 days left. We're back. We are live from a bunker somewhere in the middle of beautiful downtown Burbank, California. And I would like to welcome everybody listening all around the world, all across the United States. Hither and thither, to and fro, back and forth, up and down, east and west, north and south. Far and near. This is Fade to Black for KJCR, the Game Changer Network, and KGRA, the Planets. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. What's cracking, everybody? How you doing? Good evening. Tonight, man, I'm so happy about this. Tonight, international UFO researcher Steve Mera. That's right, live from the United Kingdom. Manchester. Can't believe it, man. Steve Mera is here. Steve Mera, one of the United Kingdom's most respected researchers in the realms of ufology, unexplained, and supernatural, with over 1,000 hours of mainstream alternative TV program interviews such as National Geographic's Paranatural and Wild X-Files. He is the head tutor for the UITC Investigators Training Courses in Ufological Studies and is the CEO of Phenomena Magazine, the world's largest e-zine of its kind. It's distributed, check this, in 12 countries with over 1.8 million subscribers. He's an accomplished author of several books, including A to Z of the Unknown, Strange Happenings, and Paranormal Insight. And he's also the founder of the Scientific Establishment of Parapsychology, established back in 1996, and the chairman of MAPIT, Manchester's Aerial Phenomena Investigation Team. And that was established all the way back in 1974. And you can go to his website. The links are right there at jimmychurchradio.com for Zohar Management. I would like to welcome back to Fade to Black, the one and only Steve Mera. Steve, good morning, man. How are you?
I'm good, Jimmy. Thank you for having me on. Excellent.
I like that little chuckle. I like that little chuckle. I do. I appreciate everything that you do, Steve, and not only your contributions to the community and your just tireless efforts to push this massive juggernaut forward, but also your personal friend and the relationship that we have with you, myself, Rita, Fade to Black, and everything that is going on over at the UK, and you allowing us into that international community is something that is very important to us. So I just want to take the time before we continue to thank you for all of that. Okay?
Yeah, thank you, Jimmy. Yeah, no, thank you. I mean, at the end of the day, you know, we got to keep the flame burning in this subject, and no better way to do so than networking. And of course, there's many, many people in the UK that are aware of your show. I do know that. Many people always asking. And of course, we're bringing you over to the UK this year. So they're in for a real treat.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But can I say one thing? You guys are so cool. So we sit down. I'm going to just do this for the audience. You guys are so cool. And I said, look, man, I'm coming over. I want to walk out on that stage and say, hello, Manchester, right? And you guys were like, absolutely. You spin around and get it into the conference schedule right there. Jimmy hits the stage and says, hello, Manchester. And I'm like, how cool is that? And I can't wait for that moment. And I hope I don't flub it.
They're going to love it, Jimmy.
I hope I don't flub it.
It's a real treat.
I hope I don't flub it. Well, this is where I do want to start. And the UFO, and I want to say this in a gentle way because I don't like to offend people. But it's really simple. The UFO question is not an American thing. And that is, and I know you'll agree, globally, that perception kicks in because of all of the marketing and the books and the researchers and the conferences and some of the big cases only are big cases because of the way that they're publicized and talked about. But that it comes from the United States, and it is clearly not that. This is a global effort, isn't it?
It absolutely is a global effort. I mean, it surprisingly goes back a lot further than what we initially thought. Researchers now are finding a connection to the phenomenon right back to 700 BC. Really, we have to consider the fact is, how long have we been around to observe the phenomena, recognize for what it is, and start doing something about it? And that's only really pretty much over since the 1940s, to be honest with you. But the subject of the UFOs goes back a long, long time, and is global, and still is global. It is a global phenomena. Unfortunately, we don't get to hear as much of the information. I'd only say we probably hear about 5% of the information that's coming out. I reckon about 95% of incidents around the world we don't hear about, simply because of divided in different countries, language barriers, so on and so forth. But we are starting to get more information, and thank God for the internet. I mean, though that does have a lot of disinformation on there, there is also the option of opening doors and networking with other countries and other researchers and trying to put these pieces of the puzzle together. My complaints, and this is where things are kind of like a paradox. Check this out, Steve. I used to complain, and I still do, that when it comes to ancient and lost history, the United States is ignored. That we're paying attention to Giza, or we're looking at Stonehenge, or we can look at Bolivia and Peru and even Greece, right? But all of these ancient sites around the world, nobody talks about the United States. That we are the redheaded stepchild of the megalithic community. It's like nobody cares. But there is a genuine history here that needs to be researched. And on the same token, I'm complaining that too much UFO research is focused on the United States and not around the world. It's weird, isn't it? You can't have it both ways, and the grass is always greener. But we can say the United States is the capital of research in the subject of UFOs. It always has been. And that's simply because of its massive undertaking from the governmental undertaking of research into the UFO phenomena. I don't think any other country has done as much research officially under government projects and programs than any other. And I think because they've done so much, there has been a huge amount of information that's been leaked to the general public over the years, even under the Freedom of Information Act now. And that is what stands out more than any other
because other countries have had research programs, don't get me wrong, but they've been small in comparison to the overwhelming amount of research programs the United States have been involved in regarding this subject. So it would seem anybody who's coming into the subject would think straight away, if you want to learn about UFOs, America's the place to go. And yes, I would say it's a great starting place because you've got all this documentation, official documentation, which kind of puts you on the map to say straight away, this is a real phenomena, and it's been concerning the United States government for a long time. However, when you start nitpicking through other research programs around the world, you'll find that other countries have pretty much done the same thing, but a lot less. And obviously because that was probably down to they didn't have enough money to afford such heavy research programs and long-standing ones. But I believe that is still continuing in the US. I doubt very much that those things have certainly passed. I think they're probably still continuing today, and we'll probably hear about them in years to come.
Now, I've never asked you this question. As basic as it is, I've never asked. What got you here? What happened? Did you have a sighting? Was your mom abducted? You know, what got you into the subject so many years ago?
Well, it's a good question, and surprisingly, it doesn't get asked very often. But I would say most researchers in the field have had some type of experience, and that's brought them into the subject, even if they admit it or not.
Right.
Because it's difficult for researchers, because when we're going out there and we're talking with people and about their experiences, we've got to be seen not to be biased. You know, I mean, it's not like we're going up there because we're believers. We're actually up there sometimes because we just want to find out what the hell's going on. But most, I would say, have had experiences and have brought them to the table. Others probably haven't. For me, I didn't talk about my personal experiences for a good 25 years. Because I didn't want it to be deemed that I was a believer in the subject. You know, it's not a matter of belief, it's a matter of evidence at the end of the day.
Right.
But I did have experiences from when I was young, from when I was 7 years of age, the ufological type phenomena. And I have continued to do so on a regular basis most of my life. Though that didn't really give me any answers. Seeing these things in the sky and having these strange experiences didn't really provide me any answers, just opened up my door to say, yes, there's certainly a lot more going on in life than what some people experience. And that kind of led me into trying to understand the phenomena. And of course, I was lucky because I had a father that was interested in the subject. And whilst my friends at school were reading kind of comics, I was tucking into his Eric von Daniken books.
Right.
And I was fascinated with the pictures of Nazca lines and things like that. And it kind of drew me in. I wanted to know more.
Well, hold on.
But I had the option, I did so.
Hold on, Steve. Hold on. I'm not going to let you get away that easily. You thought that you could just dance past the question, and I'm going to give you credit for the effort. Okay. Okay. Let's back up. You just said 7 years old.
Yes.
Now I'm trying to think what year that might have been. I know, Steve. So around 1900. No, I'm just kidding. At 7 years old, you and I are the same age. So 7 years old, we're talking somewhere in the mid-60s, right? Mm-hmm. What happened?
Well, I had no idea about UFOs or strange creatures or anything like that. I mean, you know, I was pretty much a normal kid, grew up, I was single. My mum and dad only had one child, so there's only myself, and I never used to wake up at night. I was quite a sound sleeper until one particular night I woke up and it was still dark. The orange light from the street light was coming into my room as it normally did, lighting up the room, but there was one darkest part of my bedroom, and I heard a rustling noise. Now, I don't know why I woke up, but I looked into the darkness, and out the corner of my bedroom came a small figure. I can only describe it as a small being with large dark eyes, and he was about my size. I say he as well. This is what's really unusual. I say he, and I don't know if it was a he, but it came out of the darkness of the corner of my room. I don't know how, and I was absolutely petrified. And I had an experience I can only describe as this thing took control of me and wanted to examine my emotions. and I was given certain emotions, and this thing was monitoring how I would react to those emotions. And it seemed to last forever, but it was probably really only last a few minutes at that. And I just could not take my stare away from his face. Could not do it. Could not move. Totally under control. I found myself going through these different emotions. 1 minute happy, jumping up and down on the bed laughing. The next minute sobbing with sadness and even pain. This thing grabbed my cheeks. It brought its hands up, 4 fingers, not 5. It brought its hands up and squeezed my cheeks very, very hard, and caused significant pain and upset. And this was it. I can only imagine now, looking back, it's like a test of emotions. After this, it kind of just faded off into the corner of the darkness of the room again and disappeared. And of course, I kind of came round, freaked out, and ran into my mother and father. But I remember the stress of experiencing this. I had a bed quilt with frilly ends on, and I was pulling away at these frilly ends because out of the frustration not being able to move, I was under control of something. Mm-hmm. And that kind of led me to believe that I wasn't dreaming this. This was a real incident. And since then, growing up, I had multiple different sightings of things. And now I see probably around about 3 or 4 a month now, every month.
Now, growing up, what part of Great Britain were you living in?
Manchester.
Oh, you've been in Manchester your whole life. I see. I didn't know that.
My whole life.
I didn't know that. So this was now Manchester, and I sort of understand the country, but Manchester is a manufacturing industrial city, right?
It was, yeah. I mean, it still is.
It still is, right?
It is, yeah. And everybody kind of kept themselves to themselves. There was nobody talking about that type of stuff back in the early '60s, and not in Manchester. It wasn't taken.
Well, I'm asking. I'm making that point because this isn't in some rural cottage in the countryside, right? This is in the city of Manchester.
It was a housing estate, in a very tight-knit housing estate,
right,
in Manchester. Literally a stone throw from the school where I went, and friends and family all around. And this incident just popped into my life for no apparent reason, and it never really left since that day. It seems to be that doorway has been left open somewhat, and I don't know. I mean, I can't say it's me, because people who are with me will experience this phenomena, and have done, and it continues today.
I find it interesting that an experience like this, which is a real contact experience, this is physical, you were touched, that is contact. But you didn't speak about this really for how long? 25 years?
25 years, yeah. I mean, I was quietly doing my research. I was interviewing people who claimed to have had those experiences. I found them fascinating. But I didn't want to be painted with this brush to consider that I was a believer, because I came into this from a very scientific side, doing parapsychological research as well, and trying to understand, after doing behavioral psychology, understand how people and why people might have these experiences. I was trying to figure out, mostly for myself, why would a 7-year-old, I wasn't really allowed to watch much television when I was young. My parents were very active, and I didn't really have anything like sci-fi things around. I think I had some toy cars and things like that, and that was about it. And this incident suddenly happens out of the blue, and of course, since then, I wanted answers, and I tried to get them by delving into the subject. And of course, it drew me more and more in. And hearing about other people's experiences, I can relate to them, but I didn't talk about it for a good 25 years because there was some concern as to how people might see a researcher. if they know that they are an experiencer as well. I wanted to come into it with an open mind, being objective, and at the same time just taking the information and working out exactly what is actually going on here. Of course, those answers have still not been delivered, even though they've spent all this time, 38 years doing this now. I still don't have those answers as to why me, why then, and what was it all about? I mean, that was the only type of incident I've had like that. It's not one I would want again, I'll be honest with you. But it's just profound. I do not have the answers, and I might not even ever get those answers. But one thing is, it's been a hell of a journey over the last 38 years of trying to figure out what it was all about.
Have you found anybody else in Manchester that had the same experience, and certainly at around the same time?
I've talked to a few people that claim that they had childhood experiences around about my age. A lot of people report around about the age of 7 years of age. Right. Sometimes bedroom visitations, sometimes, other locations. And I was also thrown into the field of the paranormal as a young. My grandmother's house was very much haunted. I lived with her for some time, and they had a poltergeist at the house. And it was pretty normal for me from a 7-year-old about the paranormal, because my family didn't shy away from talking about what was going on at the house. And that went on for a long time until they had to relocate. Manchester Housing relocated them and pulled down those old houses. But I was no stranger to the paranormal, and I'd witnessed a few things, throughout my life, which you could put as paranormal in origin. Now,
there is, at the age of 7, and I'm trying to put my head into a 7-year-old's, mind, but at the age of 7, if that would happen to you today, it would be different. Right, it happened to me older. I was ready to do some Bruce Lee, right? But were you scared, or were you thinking about?
I was absolutely petrified. Right. I mean, this thing, I had no way of getting past this thing, because I would have to get by it to get to the door, and that was the first thing I wanted to do, is run. And then, as if I slightly moved to go to do so, and that is when I felt a complete lock. I couldn't do it. I couldn't move. And in my frustration of being petrified of this thing slowly moving towards me, I'm grabbing down unknowingly at the quilt cover. And in my frustration and fear, I'm pulling it apart. I'm pulling the ends off this quilt because I'm just so frightened. I had no control. I was completely conscious of my actions, that this thing was making me do these things, and I could not do anything but do it. And I did exactly what it wanted me to do. And though that it did talk, it never actually talked. I heard it, and it told me to do certain things. And even though I didn't want to, I found myself doing them.
What?
And it was just totally out of control. I was absolutely petrified.
Steve, what did it? We've got 4 minutes to the break. What did it ask you to do?
Well, the first thing was there was an overwhelming sensation of happiness, and it said, enjoy yourself. And I was jumping up and down on the bed, laughing. Now, this is not something I would be doing with this thing in the room, though I couldn't understand why I'm jumping up and down on the bed and laughing, finding it fun, because deep inside, I was absolutely terrified.
Right.
But then next minute, I'm sat on the edge of the bed. It comes very close up to my face. I cannot pull my eyes away from its eyes. No way would it allow me to. And it wanted me to express sadness, and I felt this overwhelming sadness. I can't explain what caused this sadness. It wasn't like I had flashes of images through my head, which was upsetting. I just found myself in floods of tears and sobbing. At that point, there was hands that came up. I remember these hands coming up and grabbing the sides of my cheek and pinching them very, very tightly to the point where it was painful. And it wouldn't let go, and I couldn't stop it from doing this. And after that, it kind of it said everything is okay, everything will be okay, and then it kind of stepped back, and I was thinking at this point I can make me dash for the door, but I was still locked on it. I could see the door, but I was still looking at its face, and it just kind of went back into the darkness, the darkest corner of my room, and as soon as I was kind of released, I think it seemed like I was suddenly released, and that was when I bolted. I bolted for it, and I was screaming. Mother and father were up, lights were on, and I think that happened for the rest of the duration of the night. There was no way I was going back in that bedroom. How
does that affect somebody? You know, you're 7 years old. That's one thing, but this has to leave a mark for the rest of your life. How do you think it changed you?
Well, my mother and father convinced me as young that was a dream. You've had a bad dream. You've had a bad dream. And I tried desperately to convince myself that was the case because it was easier as a child. Because, you know, after that, I had to leave the light on. I was scarred. I never had to leave the light on. The light was simply the street lights outside that come through open curtains, you know, and I was always happy with that. From then on, from a long time, I had to sleep with the lights on. There was no way. I slept with my mother and father for a duration of weeks because of that incident. I didn't settle very well whatsoever. But they said that they talked to apparently a doctor, and he said it must be night terrors. It's night terrors. It happens with children, very active minds, and so on and so forth.
Right.
Something deep down inside, though, told me that there was a lot more to this. But I tried to convince myself otherwise, and it was a safer, better thing to do as a child to convince that, and it helped me settle somewhat. But as time went on, I knew there was more to it.
Well, that explains everything, Steve.
Yeah,
well, that explains everything, and certainly, setting you on the path of a committed life of research, that would do it. That would certainly do it. I never had anything like that as a child. I had experiences with my family and things, and I've said this many times. I never had the UFO experience. I never had anything like that. I don't remember seeing a ghost or anything paranormal or supernatural growing up. Everything that I encountered in my life was as an adult. And so I don't have that element with me. Fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. Let's take our break right here. Our guest tonight, live from the United Kingdom, Steve Mera. International man of mystery. But not a mystery anymore, Steve. There you go. All right, we'll pick up where we're leaving off when we come back after this short break. This is Fade to Black. You can follow me on Twitter at JChurchRadio. You can follow Steve. Steve, what's your Twitter?
My Twitter is just my name, Steve Mera.
There you go. We'll be right back after this short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Tonight, live from the United Kingdom, Steve Mera. You know, Steve, it's like this. Okay, all right. I want to talk about Nick Pope for a second, if you don't mind. Nick, of course, is going to be joining us June 26th and 27th over in Manchester. But much has been made over the release of said documents coming out of the MOD and what has been happening over there. When the news broke last week, 2 weeks ago, that the last pieces of these documents are now going to be released, and they're going to be on the websites over government websites over there. And I was pretty excited, and it was headline news over here. All of the mainstream media picked up the story. So I'm reading it, and this is my take. You can tell me I'm wrong or not. But as I read this was the civilian reports that are being released. The ones that were called into the government, and then they send you a questionnaire and you fill out a form. And, you know, what the sighting, whatever. But this is not the
the British Air Force, right? This is not the government's knowledge of UFOs or ETs or contact or their studies or their research or anything like that. This is from the civilian side that is being released. Am I understanding this correctly? And does that mean that it's not that big of a deal?
Well, it depends on who you talk to, Jimmy. And for me, it's a massive deal. Now, let's just to start off with, I mean, they started releasing documents quite some time ago, and it's not the first time they've turned around and said, well, that's kind of it. We've pushed them out. I think this was an effort for the Ministry of Defence to kind of be seen as transparent on the subject of UFOs, and this came very closely after closing down the Ministry of Defence Staff 2A reporting area of UFOs. We can't actually report them to the government anymore. They said that they were kind of no interest in them anymore, and shut that department down, leaving people kind of scratching their heads. Who do they report UFOs to these days? Following that, there was a release of documents, and then he kind of said, well, that's as much as we've got. And then they found another lot under the carpet, and they did the same thing, and they're still doing so. But for me, it's really interesting because this batch of information, be it the civilian documents, will tell me a lot. Because whilst I mean, a lot of people haven't been in the subject to start off with. A lot of people haven't been into UFOs in the UK long enough when Nick Pope was in office. I knew Nick quite well. And I did correspond with Nick whilst he was in office. Now, after Nick had left, there was a number of people that took over his place. That was a lady called Gaynor South and Kerry Philpott. And I became quite good friends with these people. And they would willingly share information with me. We used to have conversations on the phone, and it was quite open conversations about incidents that took place. Now, during my work in the subject of UFOs in the UK, there were some significant incidents that took place involving police officers and numerous sightings. Some of these reported in the hundreds that I filed reports to the Ministry of Defence. There's documentation on this that the Ministry of Defence have, and I've never seen them released. There's about 3 different cases that I can think of that I was involved with the MOD on this, and they've never been released. So I'm hoping that these are going to be in that dispatch. Now, if they're not, it's going to tell me a lot. It's going to tell me that, hang on a second, they're still holding back some of the good stuff, because these were very significant cases. And if they are holding back the good stuff, then that whole theory of being transparent kind of goes out the window, really, to be honest with you. And I'm sure there's still a lot more that they're probably sat on that still might not see the light of day, unfortunately.
Now, what about the MOD's side of it, right? The RAF's side of it? Will we ever see a release of their research into this phenomenon? And do you have access to that through the same Freedom of Information Act outreach program?
Unfortunately not. Not here in the UK. We don't have such programs like that, which is a real shame, because I'm sure we'll be filing left, right and centre with documentation. Right. Sometimes things do get out, just like the Holt memo. From the Bentwaters UFO incident in December 1980. Things do. But, I mean, of course, we had to go to the US for that, a lot of the information, because it was a joint Anglo-American facility, that information pertaining to this UFO case in the UK had to be obtained from the US. And that's kind of how that came out. I mean, at the end of the day, it's pretty much locked down the UK. We don't tend to get information. There's very little is shared. And just now and again, you might just get a little hiccup where something gets released and it causes a bit of a spin. However, it's pretty closed down. The UK is pretty tight. The government doesn't want to correspond with anybody in regards to subjects of UFOs anymore. There's no one to write to. There's no one to call. And really, what people do now is you could say it's a very good form of management. That the process of reporting a UFO now is simply putting something up on YouTube or talking to friends and family. And those stories die very, very quickly. Unfortunately, some of them don't even get to be seen by researchers. And since the closing of the MOD, you can well imagine that a lot of reports don't come across our desk. And it's just simply because people do not know the process of how to report. And that's a real shame here in the UK.
Now, let's talk about Nick for a second. I like Nick. He's been on this program many times. And what I have found is if you press Nick, you will get another new nugget of information that he's never talked about before, right?
Yeah.
Which indicates to me that Nick knows things. He does. Do you feel the same way? And you've known him for a long time. Do you push him at points too as well to get that fresh golden nugget of information that you didn't have before?
Well, I haven't pressed Nick. I understand his situation. It's very difficult, though he has done a great thing for ufology. At the same time, I haven't pressed him. I'm assuming that he probably is aware of information that is still considered sensitive. The special areas of research, Defence Intelligence Staff 55, for an example, in the UK. There are certain departments where they had certain information, doing certain types of investigation. I'm sure Nick is aware of further information on those things, but maybe be holding some of these things back. And as we go through time, maybe there will be a little bit more information coming forward. At the end of the day, Nick might even still be in correspondence with people that are telling him that, certain process of information can be released at certain times. I believe that's very probable that if you've worked at a department like this for the length he did, that there is a process of releasing information at certain times, and others that he might not be able to release. Of course, I think it's a matter of having to play ball, really. I think if you've worked in a department like that, there has been people that suggested that Nick might still have one foot in there. I don't think that's the case. I think he's done his job. I think he's come away and he's quite knowledgeable about some of the incidents that took place. But I'm sure on the grapevine, as you do, you hear things.
Right.
And sometimes you don't want to talk about those things. It could be because that there's information to back up what Nick is saying has not been officially released. It could simply be that. At the end of the day, and might not be released. So maybe he's holding some things back until there is a physical paper trail that becomes available for some of these incidents.
Now, there's a large part of this community, and it's the fascination with Nick, too, by the way. There's a large part of this community that thinks that Nick is, he's still part of the company. That he's never left, and you can't deny that that suspicion because of his previous position, and you never really leave. Right now, is that something that we should consider with Nick? And if that is the case, I think it kicks butt. By the way, I think that makes him a really cool guy. But could it be possible that he is he's just doing his job?
He could be. It could be. I mean, we don't know for sure.
Would you be surprised?
What I can say is that Nick has shared things that he's not necessarily had to share.
Right.
And that's a good thing for ufology. Especially when we've been a bit vague on certain incidents, and it's come to light information through Nick sharing this information.
Absolutely,
so that is important. That's the way forward. Despite his actions, despite who and where he worked, the critical information has been brought forward by Nick, which has really helped conclude on some major UFO incidents over the period of time. For me, I don't think he's working for the government. I think he actually is there to assist. He said that he has an interest in this subject. He's there to assist. He's there to do as much as he possibly can do. At the end of the day, though, when it comes to giving out information, maybe that there's somebody he does have to correspond with. Maybe there is a filtering process that information gets out.
Right. Well, I mean, would you be surprised if you found out that Nick is, still? I mean, would it surprise you?
No, not at all. It wouldn't surprise me, but it certainly wouldn't bother me.
At
the end of the day, whatever that we're being told with Nick is normally there's a paper trail. You can go and find information that leads. I mean, sometimes he's just put the dots together and said, look, guys, here's the paperwork. This is the incident. And you can draw and you can put these together and kind of work it out. You know, it's not like he's telling us information and there's no paper trail existence of this thing.
Right.
You know, sometimes there is paperwork, which means that obviously he's talking about a subject and a related experience or incident that's taken place where there is credible evidence to support it.
Well, you bring up a great point. It's all good as long as the information is solid and, like you said, has a paper trail and it can be backed up. It's another thing altogether if it's disinformation and that's what we're dealing with, and that wouldn't be cool. So I totally agree with you there. I wanted to ask you, though, did you ever get a chance to visit Nick in his office?
No, I didn't. I did correspond with him a number of times. I also was involved in a number of TV shows when Nick was also there, and I've been on panels with Nick right from the early days when he first left the MOD, and because everybody in the UK wondered, hey, who is this guy? You know, he suddenly turned up at a UFO conference, and there was certainly a buzz to those events because of his position.
Sure.
However, back then, Nick wasn't saying too much. I think he was very guarded, and I think over a period of time he's learned how much information he can release, and maybe that there is more to come, but there is a systematic process of how and when that information gets released.
Well, and I'm asking because of the now infamous photograph, the poster that he had behind his desk, right? Of the craft that was shot in the valley there in the United Kingdom. By the two kids, and which he proudly displayed, showed up in his office one day and it was gone, right? Somebody took it and it was never seen again. I was wondering if you have ever seen that picture that he has referred to so many times over the years.
I have seen the picture, not through Nick, but through somebody else. Actually, I have seen that picture.
Now see, that's why we love you, Steve. That's why we love you. Okay, what did you see in the picture? Describe it.
Well, you know, obviously it was a photograph that was taken by kids, and it was a UFO in the sky, and you could clearly see a defined shape there. Nick had it up on. I did hear Nick had this up, but it was, I think, because when Nick started to become more publicly orientated, because he didn't I can show you his correspondence. It was short and sweet most of the time. He started to come out a lot more information once he'd left the MOD. But maybe that the whole attitude towards the subject was deemed a little bit too out there, a little bit too X-Filey, because you got to consider the time this was happening. You know, X-Files was pretty prominent in the UK, and hence they used to use that reference. You know, Nick Pope is the X-Files guy. Because it fell in line perfectly with the TV show. And of course, it was perfect timing. I mean, everybody wanted to know, what does the government guy know? When he first came along, he didn't talk about too much sensitive material. But when I saw it, I recognized that was the actual photograph.
And he said that out of all of the evidence that came across his desk at the MOD, that was the one piece that he could say that was an unidentified, right? That there was no way to classify that photograph. And if there was evidence of something visiting this planet, what was in that picture would be it. Would you agree with Nick in that assessment?
No. The only reasons why I wouldn't agree with Nick on that is because for the research that I've been involved in was say that we have been involved with advanced technology and flying vehicles for a considerable length of time, a long time, longer than we initially think we are. I mean, the program on exotic aircraft is tremendous. You know, I mean, we only got to take example of the stealth fighter as an example. You know, it turned up on our TV screens in 1991 during the the Gulf War, I think it was televised in the UK. And we thought, what the hell is that? When we saw it. And of course, he suddenly realized what the Americans had and had been hiding for a while is the stealth fighter. Now, when we realized that there was books released from 1970s showing the stealth fighter in 1973, 1974 being flown by Lockheed, we consider how long that was kept secret before we even saw it in 1991 on our TV screens. Mm-hmm. We've always got to consider that there is a possibility that we have been test flying exotic aircraft for a long, long time. And the problem is that these things will get misidentified for sure. I'm sure the stealth fighter got misidentified, if not hundreds, if not thousands of times by people living in sort of areas where they do test flights. And we still have that even today in the misidentification of some of these exotic flights of certain aircraft. We have it over here called the Tyrannus, which is an unmanned vehicle which is being misidentified as a UFO. I think it's been going on for quite a considerable length of time. I think we have to go back beyond any reasonable doubt that we had the technology to do that. To a point in time we say, yes, okay, now a UFO will constitute as a real UFO, when we don't have certain technology, where it's impossible for us to have had technology that advanced.
So you're suggesting that what you saw, you have identified as the stealth fighter. This was some type of advanced aircraft that was being test flown, and these kids happened to be at the right place at the right time.
I believe that a lot of tests have been carried out in the UK over the years. I know of a number of incidents that took place in the late 70s where they were definitely test flying aircraft, specialized aircraft, when Anglo-American facilities over here were test flying them and being misidentified as UFOs and occasionally being photographed and being called a UFO, and the press would pick up on it and so on and so forth. And sure, the Ministry of Defense at that time would have been alerted regarding these incidents, people reporting these things, but not necessarily have known what those objects constitute, because why should the Ministry of Defense know? I mean, this is a very compartmentalized study, the UFO, and only people will need to know about these test flights. In fact, when I talked with British Aerospace, they said, oh, well, you are aware that we build a Tyrannus, but when we want to test fly it, we put it on a Hercules bomber and we fly it over to the USA and fly in test flight there. Are you trying to tell me that that they spend all that money to send it all the way over there to test fly it? Absolute rubbish. They're going to be test flying it across the UK, across the moorlands and hills and mountain areas, and occasionally they're going to be witnessed, photographed, and seen. I believe they've probably been doing that for quite some time.
And what about before we get to the break? Is it the same situation with Belgium and the triangles that went on for years? And I mean, they were scrambling jets and they had press conferences, and this was a very public situation. Do you think that was the TR-3B and it was just test flying, or do you think it was something extraterrestrial?
Well, I've always thought the TR-3B was ours. I mean, it's built aerodynamic. It's aerodynamic. It's built to fly in our atmosphere. If it's coming from space, a brick will fly in space. It's at the end of the day, when you do back research, you start to find out there was a TR-3A, the Black Manta, and of course that had references in the UK as well. And there were conversations in the early 1980s between officials regarding the Black Manta and Anglo facilities, American and UK facilities here in the UK, where they were allegedly kept or being flown. So we have to consider the fact that those things might actually be our tech. It could really be our technology. However, when you want to parade these things in certain villages or places around the world, people are going to naturally shout and point up to the sky and say UFO, which is great for any authority who's trying to hide these things, because it immediately takes the blame away from them and onto something else. But I do believe there's a true UFO phenomenon. But I think it's become a time now where it's extraordinarily difficult to identify the difference between the real phenomena and what you might refer to as advanced technology. Right,
yeah. And I agree with you. The one thing that I take issue with when it comes to Belgium and what went on for a couple of years is that here we are in 2020 and we are not seeing fleets of TR-3Bs. It seems like it stopped, and it stopped as quick as it started. And where did that technology go? And that would suggest to me an ET component, only because it hasn't been revealed. The stealth fighter's been revealed. Right, the B-2 bomber's been revealed. We're looking at the F-22 now and the 35, and we know what the Russians have, and as advanced as these fighter jets are, and this technology, we're not seeing TR-3Bs, and we're not seeing fleets of this technology, and we're not seeing it like we were over Belgium. That's where I just kind of stop and scratch my head.
I mean, it was a perfect incident. I mean, if you really want to put this to the test, you have a live action event. You don't inform anybody of anything, and you get real scenario unfolding, which is perfect. I mean, we do that in the army, in the forces. When we want a special training to take place, we don't inform the squadron what's going to happen whilst they're out. There'll just be an ambush situation or a situation that they have to suddenly face to get true statistics. And I think that is a perfect opportunity over Belgium to be tested against Belgium's best Air Force, and the situation unfolded as it should do, as a real component which can be studied and look to those conclusions and say, okay, we're getting true statistics here, and we can only get that from people not knowing about these events and what's going to occur. I think it could have been a perfect exercise to be done. I mean, the black triangles are still, are still being seen. I've seen one myself, and they are quite amazing. And they are seen around the world. But according to information, these were initially referred to as platform vehicles and were allegedly manufactured and flown in the mid-1960s. And whilst we're all focusing on the landing of Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin on the moon in 69?
Yes.
We were probably flying these things in low orbital paths in 1965. We can see a massive divide with technology here, and I think it's that massive divide, and it's because of what the technology consists of, is why we see this not coming forward. I mean, how long has the stealth bomber been out there? It's been out there for a long time. You can go and see this at air shows and things. You try getting near it, though, that's a whole different ballgame. Try finding out the information about what it actually consists of. How does it take off on a runway, which is half the size it needs? What type of tech is it using? And you'll start to find that it's utilizing certain technology that they do not want out, and that's the reason why you can't get hands-on on a stealth bomber. You might be able to see one at an air show and so on and so forth, but when it starts getting to the crux of the matter, you're not going to get near one, and that's probably because it involves certain technology that's being utilized in the bomber's wings to give it lift. And this electromagnetic field around it reduces its weight vastly to do so. This specialized technologies, I think, that's what keeps us from this information coming forward, that we might have these platform vehicles and have these capabilities, but it's the tech that's involved. Because when you start asking where the tech has come from, that's where it starts getting a bit tricky.
Let's take our break right here. Our guest tonight, Steve Mera, live from Manchester. Steve, great conversation. We'll pick it up where we are leaving off right now. This is Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church, on the Game Changer Network and KGRA, The Planet. Stay with us. Welcome back. Fade to Black. I am your host, Jimmy Church. Tonight, live from the UK, Steve Mera. And I want to remind everybody June 26th and 27th, 2020. We will be over in the UK at the Awakening Conference in Manchester with Eric Von Daniken and Richard Dolan, Nick Pope, Grant Cameron. We're going to be talking about this a little bit later. 12 other speakers, special guests. And just go to, for tickets and information, awakeningufo.com. We'll talk more about this at the top of the hour. But, Steve, I want to stay on the international side of research for a second. And I want to talk about a subject that is uncomfortable for many. It certainly was for me. I did go in. I went down the rabbit hole with Richard D. Hall, and I haven't heard much of Richard lately. What happened to Richard D. Hall? And, of course, I'm talking about the touchy subject of human mutilations. We had a lot of research out there with Linda and others on cattle mutilations and things, but the subject of human mutilations is a heavy one, and Richard was front and center with all of that. Where is he these days?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, a lot of people have been asking that question to me in the UK. I'm good friends with Richard. I've lectured alongside him. I last saw him probably about 3 or 4 years ago, and he was still prominently lecturing. I know he's had a number of issues with his TV channel, which was going out across in the UK. 1 minute it wasn't on, and then it was back, and then it wasn't. And I know that because there was controversy over, they didn't like what he was researching. He was a very bold researcher. He asked questions, people that even I wouldn't ask. And I credit him, and I have credited him many times for his bravery. He was a bit of a lone man and going for it, and fantastic. Things, I think, changed when he settled down and he had a child. And I think that was an impact on his research, because one can always, when you're a loner and you go out there and you do this research and you haven't got people connected to you in that manner, then you can be a little bit more forward in your investigation. Questions. But now since he's had a little come on the scene, I believe it looks like he's just taken a step back. I'm not pressing these very important issues that people kind of don't talk about. I've certainly done my research in that area as well, but it's a bit of a taboo area. It's not welcome at a lot of different places, these conversations, but it is something that still does continue.
The one thing that Richard had the freedom of, and especially back when he was, how do I say, he was an influencer. He was a big part of this community, but he had his brilliant website, a lot of technology invested into it. He had his network, his television network, and his radio program, and nobody asked a question like Richard D. Hall.
Yeah,
I mean, nobody
did press.
Oh man, he had me on the edge of my seat, because I, as an interviewer, would be reticent to go into the zones that he did. But he continued this for years, and his knowledge of the subject is second to none. And when we talk about human mutilations, and you're going to go out and look for evidence of this and question and go throughout the country looking into this very sensitive issue, there are going to be people that push back, and that's what he encountered, right?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, there were people saying regularly to him that he shouldn't talk about these sort of things. You can consider that the reasons why, obviously, if these incidents are truly happening, then there is some concern regarding panicking people. So that's kind of the main reason. Of course, there are people who won't want this information out. And, of course, Richard was like a dog chasing a bone. He would never leave it, to the point where, people would get angry with him, aggressive with him. I'm sure he's had a few threats in his time.
Sure.
So it isn't for everybody, I admit. I mean, you'll find that most of the researchers in the field have delved into it somewhat. and kind of put it on the shelf because it is a bit of a taboo.
It is. Did you jump into the research?
Well, I was actually, for me, I was quite shocked. I was invited in, I think it was 1998. There was an organisation called Quest International, run by Tony Dodd, a researcher in the UK.
Right,
he was a police officer.
Right.
He'd had his own UFO experience and opened this organisation, and they had regular, reasonably large conferences in the UK, in Sheffield and Leeds. And I was invited along, and I met up with Bob Dean. Some researchers will know Bob Dean. He was involved in the SHAPE report, and he'd been involved in the study of UFOs for quite some time, and had lectured around the year. He had visited the UK a few times, but he was mostly known for his work throughout the US. And he had met up with Tony Dodd and a couple of other gentlemen, and during the conference, I was invited to attend a meeting which took place upstairs. It was a private meeting. It wasn't for the public. I was introduced to two other gentlemen who I do not know who they were. And Bob was sat there as well as Tony Dodd. And on the table in front of me were 5 very large reports. Now, taking into consideration Tony Dodd was an active police officer at one point, and certainly had connections with people and research and investigations that maybe had carried out. These reports were opened up, and a short conversation took place in regarding human mutilations. And I saw 5 reports on this table, including photographs, including references to the names of these people who were, by all accounts, according to the photography and the information, were exhibiting exactly the same things as animal mutilations. And they had been found, and they had been somewhat of a cover-up in regarding the deaths and how they had occurred. Some of them were still listed as apparently still missing, I believe 2 or 3 of them, and hadn't come to light. I don't know how these reports came to be on that desk. I'm assuming it's something to do with the other 2 gentlemen that did not give them their information. And a conversation took place about how these things have been going on for a considerable length of time, and that there are at least 5 or 6 of these reports available to only a handful of people in the UK. I believe Richard D. Hall managed to get those very same reports I saw, because he has openly mentioned that he has had 5 or 6 reports, and it's something to do with Tony Dodd. So I'm assuming those are exactly the same reports that I've seen. And they were they were scary and very concerning. And it wasn't something that was brought to the general public at that time. It was very sensitive, and probably still is quite a sensitive area.
You saw. I'm getting a little chilly right now. It's a pretty creepy subject. You did get a chance to open up these reports and look at them, and you saw photographs of the victims?
I did. One of them was a girl who was still classed as missing. She'd never been found. And she was identified as this girl, and she was showing that she had been, mutilated like animals had been. And the photographs were pretty, they were taken, professional photographs. So I'm assuming that this was an investigation by the police, and someone along those lines have not released this information, and which is shocking. It's terrible. There's an injustice there for the family. However, I believe that there was considerably more than what we were just being shown. There probably was more. And I was seriously concerned at the time. I thought, what, and why am I even there? Why am I actually being shown these documents? So I've been invited along. And I was only because I was close with Tony Dodd at the time. Maybe that it was just, come and have a look at this, you're going to be shocked. It was kind of one of those things. I don't think he realized how shocked I actually was, because I'd heard rumors about these things, especially since the incident of the gentleman that was found in, I think it was Mexico, of a human mutilation case. That was the only one I was aware of. until I saw these, and that put a whole new perspective as in regards to this phenomena and how widely it could be taking place.
Yeah, well, obviously, this kind of knowledge gets out. We do have panic in the streets. There's no question about that. But that's genuine fear. The other part of this, though, Steve, is when we are experimenting on animals here on this planet. We do that for lots of different reasons. We do that, but also the hunting that we do, or going into a jungle and looking for new species and bagging and tagging and bringing them out for our own research and dissecting, and the things that we do in the lab, dissecting frogs in your sophomore year in high school in biology class, the one thing we always feared that day when you were going to dissect your first frog. These are things that we do. Would there be a way to look at it if ET is coming to this planet and we are just frogs to ET? Is that just outside of the realm of possibility? And I would say, no, it's not. And I'm not okay with it, but we have to maybe consider that situation, shouldn't we?
We should. I mean, it's not a new phenomenon. I mean, I talked with a gentleman who was a doctor, actually, an Indian gentleman who contacted me, and he told me about his grandfather. And then when he was living in India, he lived on a farm. It was a farming community. And occasionally the lights would come down from the mountains and the young children were rushed out to get the animals in, the stock in as quickly as possible under shelter, because they would often be found mutilated. Now, that, when I talk about, it's 1913, the incident would have been in India, a farmland. And if we're talking 1913, you question how long these things have been going on for. I've done a considerable length of research in the mutilation phenomena. We're talking with people from all around the world. It isn't something new. It has been going on for a long time. In fact, the UK had its own spate of mutilations. In 1993 was the main year. But what mostly we had was mutilated deer, foxes, and even birds, chickens and things like that. It was ridiculous, the amount we had in 1993. We do have the odd cow and and larger animals that are found like in exactly the same manner. I wrote a document with my colleague. They'd done some great research, my colleague, him and his wife, Barry Fitzgerald, who's on a number of projects with me. And one of them was the investigation into these animal mutilations. And we actually sent this document over to Linda Moulton Howe. Now, Linda Moulton Howe is, she's specialized in this research for quite some time, as we know. And from what we were seeing, from the blood being taken and from the soft tissue being taken, was something referred to as mucous membrane collection. And this is all to do with the immune system. Now, all these locations where we see the organs missing, soft tissue missing, the blood, is associated to where locations you'll find mucous membrane, which is associated to the immune system. Now, when we talk to pathologists and they tell us that, these animals that have been found mutilated were, and it's awful, this is why I don't normally talk about these things, it's horrible things to say, but these animals were alive at the time these incidents happened. And they're alive because they generate huge amounts of fear. And that amount of fear causes certain chemicals to be released in the brain, which increases the immunity system tenfold. And what happens is that the gathering of that material is done through the process of taking blood, up to 10 gallons from cattle in some cases, and soft tissue and even organs. And that's the same, not only applies to just cattle, it applies to most animals, and even humans actually as well. It's not a new phenomenon. I mean, if we even go back and look at the Dyatlov Pass, now I know that my partner, Jackie, she has been researching the Dyatlov Pass incident. It was an incident that took place in 1959 in Russia, as well as I know Tracy Garbutt-Dolan, Richard's wife, is also very much involved in research in that particular case as well. And that particular incident involved a number of people, and clearly they were mutilated, and there was a mass cover-up regarding this incident. This was from 1959. So we have to consider that the phenomenon has been going on quite a lot over the years, going back longer than we necessarily thought. And there is a process of why this is being done. In fact, the most recent research shows that a lot of these animals actually dropped from height. One was I think it was in Colorado last year, was found in a tree. When they dropped this cow, it actually landed in a tree and got caught in the tree. Some of them are impacting on the ground and they're breaking ribs and backbones and things, and they clearly can tell this animal has been dropped from height. These things are still going on quite regularly, but we don't hear them so much. I mean, the press aren't picking up on them as much as they would. Maybe that they're suppressing information, but these things do get out and people do talk.
There's I released my list of top 10 UFO cases that intrigued me. I did this last month or the month before, but the top of my list, I think number 2 actually on my list, is Rendlesham. There's a lot of reasons why it's there, but of course when you have the witnesses, still alive to such a dramatic event that we can interview. We have the documentation that is applied to it in the Halt memo that you mentioned earlier. All of that is in play with Rendlesham. But there's another thing that is in play in Rendlesham that we don't understand over here in the United States, and that is the drama that is playing out in the United Kingdom with the different players involved. And I haven't seen this type of anger in any UFO case. I mean, it is pretty dramatic over there in the United Kingdom. Why the drama, Steve? And I know that you're not necessarily a part of it, but you're certainly there to observe. What's going on, man?
Well, it's messy. I mean, to be honest, everybody knows in the UK about the Rendlesham Forest. It's our main incident. It's the one that put the UK on the map regarding UFOs. And it's very personal. We're only a very small island. There's only a certain amount of researchers, and it becomes a very personal case. For me, my first involvement was very early on. I think it was in 1990. 1991, I visited the location. I wasn't interested in, I'd heard everything I possibly could. I was good friends with Peter Robbins, and I heard everything I possibly could, but I was interested in the trees. I was interested in the storm damage that in that area that managed to clear people out of that area for a long duration of time, and literally topsoil being taken from those locations. The whole area was locked off from the general public because of a very unusual freak storm, which took place in that location and came in almost immediately after the incident happened. Now, for me, I was interested in the research on the trees. I was looking at trees which were up to 2 meters wide, which were snapped at the trunk. Now, you can't tell me what type of wind does that. It snaps a 2 meter tree at the trunk. Completely. And this was very focused damage. Other places weren't touched at all. And it just seemed to be specific locations, close, if not right, where the location happened, the incident happened. Now, you do your research, you'll find that Rendlesham Forest is no stranger to the paranormal. I mean, the forest itself has an immense amount of paranormal incidents that take place. And ufologically, if you research, you'll find Rendlesham and Bentwaters is in that location of Ipswich, where there have been plentiful UFO experiences and people having sightings of UFOs long before 1980. So let's put that on the map first, that this is a location which is renowned for phenomena, be it paranormal or ufological. Then what happens is that researchers become so dedicated to the case that when there is a problem, when something occurs, when one person says something, then somebody else says something else, there's a confliction. You've got 50% of people believing one person, 50% believing people the other, and of course you have this conflict of interest. And that gave people the opportunity to thrive upon a case, which is, for me, it's a relatively old case. I wouldn't spend the time. I think I was taught by my mentors, the longer a case has gone on, the harder it is to get credible raw information. You have to get it quick, you have to get it fast. And in what you get early on is probably the most credible. As time goes on, it gets filtered and watered and watered and watered, and little bits of distruth come and get involved in those cases. Now investigating something like that and researching it is probably worthless, because they're trying to get to the raw data now after such a long period of time is next to impossible. But I was sat in the middle watching this unfold left, right and centre, and I just never got involved. I said to all parties involved in the UK, do not post on Rendlesham on my social media. I don't get involved in Rendlesham, right? Because you can't be seen to take sides. So I just stayed neutral. I just said, look, I'm interested in the case. It's a fascinating incident, but for me, it's about the evidence and what new data is there now that could possibly be rewarding. And unfortunately, I don't think any of it is. There might be some good bits in there, but unfortunately, it's got mixed in with all the bad stuff. And that's what's happened to this particular case. It's become a very messy case. And maybe that was the way it was supposed to be. Because when there was a certain amount of interest in this case, when Nick's book came out, that there's a spotlight put on Bentwaters and the incident again, and press were picking up on it, and there were new interests being developed, and all of a sudden this happens, and of course it causes corruption in the ranks, you could say, and a case which has been loved by many is suddenly being one now which is kind of shunned and said, well, I don't even want to get involved in that because it's too messy now. Maybe there was a purpose to that, I really don't know, but it's a shame, because I've seen friends divided on either side, friends that I would say I'm friends with both sides, but it's very, very difficult. You get caught up in the middle of this thing. For me, it's about the raw data. For me, it's about the evidence. And if there's nothing new to gather, 20, 30 years on, which is credible and worthy for that case, then I have to step aside and agree with people. I agree with fellow researcher Peter Robbins and the work that he's been involved in. And he was stuck in the middle, as many people have been in this case. But the truth of the matter is that it's a phenomenon. It's been going on there for a long time, long before the actual incident took place in 1980.
I totally agree. Going back, the original evidence, the tapes, the audio recordings, the Halt memo, the original witness testimony, we can stop right there. The only part about it that, because I know that the incident happened, right? And I've had John Burroughs, I've had everybody on the show at one point. I've had everybody that was there on this program, some of them multiple times. But John Burroughs, I did 2 shows with him where we absolutely went step by step, day by day, minute by minute, from beginning to end on that. And pulling those details out of John. And each time, there's a little bit, a little more memory, a little more detail. But I've told everybody, that's kind of like the end all and be all of the case. If you got any questions about it, go listen to those interviews. Your questions are going to be answered, and that's where it stands today. Because now we've got real friendships that are severed. We've got, instead of everybody being, together on this very important case and representing it and pushing it forward, we don't have that today. I mean, it's gotten bad, and it didn't need to be this way. Maybe that was the ultimate plan, by both governments, to have this, the dissension amongst the troops. Could be. I don't know.
Yeah, it does happen. It doesn't happen very often with cases, but it does happen. You can imagine if it was happening with Roswell, suddenly there was a new witness that came forward and said, well, it didn't happen like that. This is what happened. And of course, now people are going to be following that. Is this something to gain after all those many years? I think we can lose where we're going with this. I think you can spend far too much time in things that don't provide enough evidence. It's all about evidence for me. I mean, I love great stories and I hear plenty of them, but But for me, it's all about, is there evidence? Is that person there? Is the evidence to back it up? What evidence is there? And at the end of the day, I would be only looking at the critical parts of that case where evidence lies. Everything else I put on the shelf, I'd listen to it, take it on board, but I'd be put on the shelf because I couldn't take it as credible unless I accept the fact that there is enough evidence to support it.
Yeah, I agree with you. And let's take our break right here. I've said so many times, Steve, that when it comes to Roswell, the best piece of evidence, that original newspaper release. That's it, right? Yeah. The original press release. Couldn't agree with you more. This is Fade to Black. Our guest, Steve Mera. More with Steve live from the UK after this short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church, live from the UK tonight. Steve Mera. What a great conversation. I'm watching Twitter, and I think everybody recognizes what should be recognized, and that is, Steve, that you are very open, you're very honest, you're not hiding behind things, and that's never been what what you are about. You've always been upfront. And if something is wrong, you're going to go straight there, like we did with the Mylar balloon a couple of years ago. You did not play around with that when others, just thought that we should leave that alone. But that's not who you are. You are always going to just be whatever the evidence is. You're going to let the chips fall, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I've seen real phenomena out there, and it does exist. Absolutely, 100% does exist. I don't mind skeptics. I really do not mind, because I was skeptical myself, and I believe you do have to experience it. You do have to see these things to accept it, and nothing less. Just as I had to change my opinion. It was a bit of a wake-up call, but I did in the 1990s. But I've always called it as it is. Yeah, and I think because we want to get further along in this subject, and sometimes we've got to push things aside to get there. Otherwise I think the subject will become static, and we'll end up going round in circles, adding another stone to the mountain we've already got.
And now I want to talk about the Awakening Conference, and for me, what makes this so different. And let's actually start there. As far as Europe goes, are there other events throughout Europe that are of this size, or is this the premier event in Europe?
This is the largest event in Europe. There are some smaller conferences that do take place. There's a few in the UK, very small ones, and overseas and throughout Europe. However, this is the largest of its kind. Has been now this is our fourth year. Going into our fourth year of the events, getting bigger and stronger each time. At first, we didn't know what the people of Manchester were going to be like. To be honest with you, the very first one we put together, it was kind of fingers crossed. Let's see how we go. And we were absolutely stunned when 2,000 people walked through our door, and we're just amazed. We're just amazed to see the reactions. It was certainly something the UK needed. There were so many people into the subject and really wanted answers, and they had nowhere to go. A lot of people weren't traveling overseas to the big events in the US, and this happening in the UK for them was just a godsend. And we have a hard following of the same about 2,000 people that do turn up at our events and make it fully enjoyable. One thing what we wanted to do, and that's a critical thing, and you can tell when you can tell when people are into the subject that run these events, because they are considering where we're going in the future. And for us, it was all about, when we initially opened our doors to this event, is about how we're going to keep the younger generation interested. And what we did is that we kind of made it a little bit like a Comic-Con. We started introducing things to the event, such as props, Star Wars props and characters and different things. We've had all sorts of different things there. A full-size UFO was built, and that was placed in the hangar. We have this event in a hangar. It's like a big hangar 18. It's huge. And though that it's just kind of everybody just goes in there and enjoys it. And we were seeing people coming with their families, and there were young guys there. I was talking to him, 15-year-olds, and they were absolutely interested in the subject, but they were coming with their families on many occasions. That's what I wanted to see. That's what I'd love to see, because I've got to consider where we all are going to be in 20, 30, 40 years' time. Who's going to be up there on the podium talking about this phenomena, where we're going in the future? So for me, it was really important that we kind of make this a family, enjoyable event, and it went really well. I was very surprised.
Well, and what I think is great here is out of the 15 main speakers, 9 are coming over from North America for this event. And that's got to be special for the United Kingdom, because a lot of us don't get a chance or an opportunity to make it over and hang out, do we?
No, we don't. I mean, unfortunately, it doesn't happen very often. However, we wanted to give people those options to be able to see, meet, greet these speakers one-to-one as well, because it's okay listening to people on the internet, but it's not the same. And people really do want to get a first-hand knowledge. And meeting these speakers for the very first time was incredible. I remember Linda Moulton-Howe and her first appearance at Awakenings, and I remember Linda pulling me aside and saying that she was overwhelmed with the amount of people that were there for her lecture. The hall was full. We had standing at the back. I mean, there must have been about 1,500 to 2,000 people in there, and she'd said that she probably had never lectured to so many people at one given time, and to her that was very special, and it has been for many of our speakers that come along, because Manchester, they're very friendly, they all love this subject, and they just all really want to have a good time and walk away with some knowledge. And at the end of the day, it's been very successful, and we're very pleased.
Yeah, Linda, right after that, she comes up to me, and I'm not kidding about this. If she hears me recount this story, she's just going to laugh. She goes, "Jimmy, I got to show you this picture." And I said, "Okay, what's up?" And she takes out her phone. She goes, "This is what I just did over in the UK," right? she goes, "Look at this crowd." She goes, "We had barriers in front. I've never seen, and I'm looking at the picture, and she said it was the funnest experience of my life." And she was so happy about that. Me, I was jealous. I was like, "Man, I want to hang out with you, Linda, because that looks like a tremendous event." And now Rita and I get to go over and actually participate and host this thing. It's going to be amazing. And you do something that's a little bit different. And before we talk about how the venue is split, because you have 2 main stages, 2 main rooms there. I want to get into that for a second. But you have a Star Wars cafe, right? It's like like the bar from Star Wars. Am I understanding this right?
It is. It's exactly the same. You wouldn't know the difference, to be honest with you. And that is available for use. And we do have props and things as well. So we make it as fun and interactive as possibly as we can.
I can't wait. Seriously, I can't wait. Okay, so you've got...
I have a great idea, Jimmy. I have a great idea when you get up there on stage.
Yep.
Is do a selfie with the crowd behind you, just to show how many people are actually there. Because you don't get to see that very often. People take photographs of the speakers, but they don't really know how many are actually there listening to these lecturers. And it's incredible. It's a great idea. Get a selfie from the stage with them all behind you. You'll see how many people there. It's absolutely stunning.
Hello, Manchester. I can't wait. So you've got you've got this ginormous airplane hangar, and the entire event is held inside, but you've got it sliced up. Tell me how that works.
Well, I mean, we had some initial plans of maybe paint it on the side, Area 51 or Hangar 18 or something, just for the laugh. But it is a huge hangar, and we have the option of setting it up the way we want to set it up, to be honest with you. And we have the options of 2 different stages at the event, Hangar 1, Hangar 2, we call it. And there's also something referred to as a Gaia Lounge as well. Now, we are going to have all these things going on. So people have an option to go to different places and listen to different people talk about what their experiences or their research. And it's also very interactive as well. The Gaia Lounge is very interactive. It's going to be going on throughout the whole event. And we'll be joined with Gaia's very own Sid Goldberg, who's going to be doing a number of very interesting interviews at that location. And we on Hangar 2 and Hangar 1 is split between different lecturers, and the people will have a choice as to who they actually want to go and see.
And we have, I love it, the Hangar 1 stage, especially for Richard and I, to be doing that. But we are going to be bringing Fade to Black over to the United Kingdom. And I'm very excited about this. And we are going to be doing what we are calling Fader X, where we are going to have a number of researchers get up and speak for 10 minutes each on only one question. And I think that the audience is going to really remember this type of concept, as opposed to, we love going to lectures and we love going to presentations, but you want to put a fresh spin on this, and certainly we do too. I think this is pretty exciting. What do you think about Fader X?
I think it's a great idea. It's never been done before, as far as I'm concerned. Certainly not here in the UK. Right. I mean, we have had panels and we have had just general lectures, but nothing like this. And I think it's really good that you can actually get to the core. I mean, if it's a specialised question that's put to a lecturer, they've got 10 minutes to put their views forward on that particular question. That's good, because that doesn't really happen in these panels. I see they're quite varied questions, and everybody has the same way of answering a question. Sometimes, I've heard lecturers on these panels, and they've had the same thing to say, really, because the question is geared in a way where there is only one answer. I think it'd be really good to actually find what these people are going to say. I'm going to be really interested what these people are going to say for 10 minutes on given questions. I think it's unique. I think it's going to be fascinating.
Yeah, because 10 minutes sounds like a long time. It is not. And you have to absolutely condense your best thoughts into just 10 minutes. And that's when, you are going to get the brilliant side of each one of these researchers and authors and personalities, because all of them talk too much, right? All of them, right? They're too used to that. And so yep. to force them, right, to get their mind into just 10 minutes, I think that's going to be exciting. I can't imagine what the audience is, how they're going to react to that. It's going to be a lot of information coming at them.
There is. It's going to be information overload, but it's going to be the best of that information, because if you've got 10 minutes to give out, you're going to give out the best stuff. That's really, really condensed.
Now, I can imagine that an event like this, not only because of its uniqueness, but of its size and its impact on the community, that the local media must be involved. I would think, is the BBC coming out? Do they cover it on the news?
Well, we did have the BBC come out last year. They did actually a full television programme at Awakenings, which was great for us. And there are numerous different media that turn up on the day, including podcasts and radio teams and so on and so forth. We are also going to have a number of people coming from Media Invest Entertainment. We're also going to be blessed with some of the MPs and council people from Blackpool in regarding a very specialised new project which is coming forward, which we'll be announcing at Awakenings. And there's a few also hidden surprises as well, which are yet to come out, a bit nearer the time probably.
Now, what about Fade to Black is coming to town, and Rita and I like to party. Do we have any events like that scheduled?
I'm sure we can sort something out, Jimmy. Yeah, I mean, we've taken people numerous. Usually, we come with a little wish list. You know, they say we're coming to Manchester. I'd like to do this, 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 and this. You know, especially for those which are football fans, because soccer in the UK is a big thing, and it's followed worldwide, especially regarding two main teams, Manchester United, Manchester City, and there are numerous different lecturers out there which are fans, and they love to visit the location because we are literally 5 minutes from Old Trafford, Manchester United ground, and we are 15 minutes away from Manchester City's football ground as well. So, you know, we tend to get these little wish lists that come along.
Yeah, right on. And this, the Star Wars, the bar, the cafe, this is on site. Is this a place where we can eat and drink and use it as a lounge? Is that what it is?
Well, there will be a dedicated area for lecturers to relax because it's full on. You know, sometimes we understand that lecturers are, you know, they're there and there's so many people wanting to ask questions. We do need an area, obviously, for lecturers to just, you know, take a pew, 5 minutes to themselves just to rest up. You do need to do that sometimes because it can be heavy going. But at the same time, we do have the Star Wars Lounge, which is basically open all the time for people to go and get something to drink. We do have cafes there as well, and there is places to eat. But the actual the cantina is pretty amazing. People love to take photographs in there because we have Star Wars characters which are in there as well.
And what about tickets and information? How much does this cost?
Well, they vary. The prices vary on the ticketing. That depending on, you know, if they just want to come for the one day, which is the Friday, or they want to come for the Saturday event as well. The Friday evening is more of a specialised event, or they can actually book the whole thing, you know, have the Friday and the Saturday together. So tickets vary depending on what people really want to come and do. It's on from Friday evening. Friday tea time right through to evening. And this is a conference that kind of goes late on into the night. I mean, you know, we're not finishing until about 11 p.m. You know, and a lot of these conferences and things tend to wrap up around 7 or 8 o'clock. But we go through to 11 o'clock. And, of course, those locations are available to generally all the public. You can obtain the details as to the different types of ticketing, pricing, and the days available throughout the website.
And I did want to mention this because when you look at the diversity of the speakers, where, you know, you've got Eric Von Daniken this year, and Billy Carson, and Grant Cameron, and Paul Sinclair, and of course Richard Bleepin Dolan, and, you know, Nick Pope, and Richard's wife Tracy, Daryl Sims. And I think that we should no longer say Richard's wife, Tracy. She is truly risen as such a dynamic personality in this community, Tracy Garbutt. But Chris Turner, Laura Eisenhower, you know, Paola Harris, and Barry, of course, is going to be there, and Sid Goldberg. Very, very wide range of ideas and theories and experiences with this kind of lineup, right?
Yeah, because they've all got something critical. I mean, if you actually look at the Awakenings this year, we have like kind of a logo, and under there it says a new beginning. And the reason is that we want to push forward with research in this subject. Now, we often talk about ufology and paranormal and different things like that, but we tend to be working around in the same circle year in, year out. Not many people are coming to the table and saying, well, you know, this is extra. This is what we've learned. This is a way forward. It's opening new areas of research. We're moving forward rather than staying static. And this is about what that feel is about in this conference. It's about new information. It's about moving forward with these subjects and developing new areas of research, because we all want answers. I'm hoping that we get more within my lifetime, because, you know, people have been sat on this secret for a long, long time, well over 70 years with the US government. And I think there are plenty of things that we can be doing. It's just that we need to push that forward. And this is this kind of broken into this title, A New Beginning, because each and every person that's going to be coming along is delivering new bits of information that's going to be pushing forward into new areas of research and where we may need to go.
The other part of and Steve, I don't know what your schedule is for the rest of the day over in the United Kingdom, but Can I get you to hang on after this break, and let's do a little overtime? Because we are running out of time. How many people do you expect at this conference, and can this center where you are at right now handle these kind of numbers? I'm sure the answer is yes, but if it's going to grow, are you going to stay at this location, or is there another bigger place in Manchester to move into?
Well, it's funny you mention that, because we are going to be announcing the birth of a new convention where Awakening is going to be kind of being modified, and a new location is currently being built as we speak, and will be available for us, a new convention centre, and it's going to be held there. We are going to have to be moved. I mean, I think the numbers are growing each and every year. The numbers are growing. We are expecting between 2,000 and 2,500 people to attend this event, and potentially there could be 2,500 people in one lecture. They have the choice to do so. And when that happens, the atmosphere, the energy is just crazy. I've never experienced that. And I've been to the biggest conferences around the world, as you know, Jimmy, along with yourself. But you don't tend to get that many people gathering at one particular lecture. They're usually dispersed into different numbers of different lectures. That does happen at our event, and it's something that lecturers don't often experience. And when they do, it's certainly notable.
The community has grown. And the reason why I think that you are very cognizant of that in the numbers is because what you and Vitaly are in the middle of. You guys are running media. You guys have your YouTube presence. You have this conference. You have film and television production and things that you are working on. And it seems like for the first time, this is a growth industry, right? It's not going backwards. It's that there is a huge interest in the subject these days, right?
There is. I mean, we're constantly battling platforms, across the internet, because there is a squeeze on this subject. There has been for a long time, and those things do become more difficult as time goes on. Though, we're finding new areas, new ways to push this information out, and people are gravitating to certain locations now where they can find out critical information. And it's about where to go to find that information, because it's dispersed massively over the internet. It takes forever to search for certain things. If it's great to have everything on one place, then so it be. And people can go to one particular location and find out a lot of different things about different researchers, what their work is, what they're doing. Sometimes it's videos, sometimes it's conferences and events. But like you say, we are involved in a kind of a 360 franchise, which is also going to be involving a TV series, a very big TV series, a very big film, big blockbuster movie, and also a number of other surprises are going to be. I can't let them out the bag, but there's quite a number of big things on the way. There's going to be big changes in this subject and moving forward, and UK is going to be certainly one of those on the map.
Well, and without I'm not here to be a part of your disclosure. I won't do that to you, Steve. But I will say this. Steve and Vitaly shared a couple of things with Rita and I at a meeting that we had this past weekend here in Los Angeles. And I literally had to stop the conversation and say, what did you just say? Right? Am I understanding you correctly? And I am just blown away. You guys have got some very, very big things that are about to launch, and I can't be more excited. But that's what you guys have planned. You guys are not playing around, and it must be pretty cool to have that kind of freedom and a partner like Vitaly, where the two of you, deliver. The two of you get things done, and that's got to be, pretty freeing, right? Where you have these ideas, but you have the ability to put all of these pieces of the puzzle together and do these huge, exciting things.
Oh, it is. It's exciting. Every day is, we don't know what we're going to experience from day to day with the contacts and calls that come into the office. But there's one main thing that we both are striving for, and that is a platform for this subject, and that it's maintained, and that there's growth in not just in presenting this information to the general public, but also in investigation and research and moving forward, and the distribution. And most of all, at the top of the chain is networking, because the more people that talk with each other, the more we learn, the more we advance.
Yeah, it has to be that way. And we're going to talk about this when we come back after the break, what Steve is working on right now. So I'll save that for after the break. We'll do that in overtime. But before we get there, Steve, it's got to be pretty cool to have a partner like Vitaly, who is the best dressed man in ufology.
Yes, yeah, he'll be listening to this,
Yeah, I know he's listening right now, and he just straightened out his collar and said, yeah, I'm that guy, Jimmy. I had to get that in. Vitaly's the best. Let's take a break. This is Fade to Black. I am your host, Jimmy Church. Our guest is Steve Mera, live from the United Kingdom. When we come back, buckle up, because we're going to discuss Project Doorway. What is Project Doorway? Well, I'll let Steve tell you all about it when we come back. This is Fade to Black on the Game Changer Network and KGRA, The Planet. Stay with us. Welcome back, Fade to Black. Heading into overtime with Steve Mera. You saw this coming. I was watching Twitter. Don't think I didn't notice. Had to do it. But you didn't know what we were going to talk about. We're going to talk about Project Doorway. And Steve, if you could, give us a little brief synopsis on what Project Doorway actually is.
Okay, well, yeah, I can do. What Project Doorway is the thorough investigation into the UFO phenomena, what it represents, what it constitutes now, today, in the 21st century. We're not in the 1950s and 60s anymore. We've come on a lot. And this is the information that can be put forward to encourage a new scientific inquiry into the UFO phenomenon, because we know so much more now than we did when the last scientific inquiry was being done around about the 1960s and 70s. I think we need to bring the best minds to the table, because we can deliver a lot more information now pertaining to what this phenomenon really truly constitutes.
So right now you are at what stage? You're 3 years into a 5-year study?
Yeah, we're 3 years into a 5-year study. Obviously, I started in ufology back in 1983 in my first case. Spent many years, exhausted the subject as far as I could go any further, and then I went into the paranormal, parapsychological route, and I studied extensively in that field. I was involved in a number of think tanks and specialized paranormal experiments that have not been given. The information is not for the general public. It hasn't been put out to the general public as yet. I was involved in 6 of them. One of those was Phenomena Project, which was the last one. And what I experienced, I have to say, did change my life. I would never believed anybody telling me if I hadn't witnessed some of this phenomenon myself firsthand from those experiments. And we learned very quickly that the phenomena now constitutes something much different than what my mentors told me back in the early 1980s. I was told the UFO phenomenon was a very nuts and bolts phenomenon. It was crafts traveling the distances of space, linear, and coming to Earth, and extraterrestrials from other planets. And of course, now, from what we know, it constitutes much, much more. And unfortunately, right from the beginning, we've had one hand tied behind our backs. All ufologists have. We've had this box that we've had to work in called ufology, and nobody was really delving into the other boxes, because the other boxes also constitute this phenomenon, such as the spiritual, the paranormal, the metaphysical, the cryptological in some cases. And because we weren't delving into those other boxes, we had one hand tied behind our backs, and we're not going to get a full picture of this phenomena until we start looking at it as a whole, which we refer to as phenomenology. There's a number of other researchers which are kind of on that same path now. And we know right from the early days, the CIA made references such as weird science and freaking magic, WSFM, and it was found in old documents on memos between the department. And it's because we were dealing with a physics that we do not really understand. We have to kind of throw away the physics that we know and introduce something else. And now physicists are coming through from Harvard saying they are aware, and it is evidence of other realities very close to ours, and they are evident through sappings of gravity. These are known to happen, and we know that the UFO phenomenon now constitutes the fact that these things not always are structured craft, they are light aberrations as well, intelligent, interactive. They have a conscious connection with the observers. We know that from pilots reporting trying to shoot these things down and they make evasive maneuvers, from people trying to photograph them. They won't allow them to be photographed until they put the cameras away. That does happen many, many occasions. There's a conscious connection. But they also have amazing capabilities of evasiveness. They want to evade us on many occasions. And things are happening in places around the Earth which are connected to this phenomena where they manifest. UFOs are seemingly manifesting in certain locations around planet Earth and go about their business. Sometimes they're going back to these locations and dematerialize. Now, I'm not a fond lover of the name portals and stargates and things like that. I think it's very sci-fi. But when NASA came out 3 years ago and mentioned about the MMS mission, which is about these portals, they actually used the word portals outside of Earth, around the planet, that these are the proper given name they used was electron diffusion regions, and they are sustainable portals. These things are going somewhere else. And the evidence that we have found when we look at statistics, now we know that from around the world, UFOs are seen so plentifully, they are actually being seen. People often say, where's all the UFOs gone? Well, they are still there. They are still happening. It's just the reporting of them is less. But statistically, when we look at them, there's a huge amount of UFOs being seen, so many around the planet on a daily basis, that if they were traveling backwards and forward to Earth, there'd be a superhighway out there. But according to the scientists and the SETI astronomers, that's not the case. They say that they can pick up the minute things passing through the ionosphere because they leave a wake of interference which could be measured and listened to. They're not seeing that. Right. Where are they all coming from is the biggest question.
Well, and the innocence of, I was talking about this earlier in the show tonight before you came on with us, the innocence of the subject and the people that were trying to make sense of it in the 1940s, 1950s, 1960s, they just didn't understand. They were probably seeing the same phenomena that we are seeing today, but they couldn't explain it. It was a nuts and bolts world. They didn't have the understanding of physics that we do today, and quantum physics, and the way that we look at things, and time, and dimensions, and gravity. We didn't have any idea. Or the amount of planets that are out there. Back then, there was no knowledge of any planet, so we didn't even know where they were coming from. We were assuming that it might even be inside of our own solar system. Today, you're absolutely right. It's a whole different situation, even though some of it may be metallic nuts and bolts flying saucers, but the descriptions from the past, which is it just appeared and then it just disappeared, they didn't understand why. Today, we're applying that science, and you're absolutely correct on this. We have to approach it from a different mindset if we're going to get these answers, right?
Absolutely. I mean, from the people I've talked to in the subject, when you really get down to the crux of the matter, is that there seems to be an inner circle of ufology and an outer circle. The inner circle of ufology are really a lot of researchers are doing their own work, such as like Jacques Vallée, for an example, and I've talked with him not too long ago, and he touched on this many years ago, but now it seems to have come full circle. If we have the right minds that come to the table, we can push into areas of new research. We can look at, for example, the metamaterial analysis. It's showing that the isotopic range of these materials are kind of not from Earth, even though that they are found on Earth, but the isotopic range is 4% differential, so it means that it's come from somewhere else, not terrestrial. But exactly the same things were seemingly found in the reports of alien implants, which Roger Lear was investigating when he was alive. Exactly the same thing. These connections need to be made. There's 11, 12 years apart between the metamaterial analysis and implant analysis, but when you look at them, they're made of the same thing. The same 4% differentials in the isotopic range is the same. Whatever these things are, there's research needs to be done in that field, as there is in gravitational anomalies. Where these objects are manifesting, there's a residue of magnetic interference and gravitational anomalies in those locations, which can be now measured, because we do have equipment that can measure time anomalies and gravitational anomalies. There is also satellites in orbit we can utilize now to look at key locations where UFO phenomena is manifesting, and it manifests in certain locations for certain reasons. One of those locations are widespread across the planet, known as positive magnetic anomalies, which have a less amount of bacteria in those areas as well, coincidentally. And there are loads of areas of these new pieces of research and push you into the doing new research in these areas by different researchers around the world. And I think we need to do that. We need to advance into these areas now and look at the phenomena as a whole, because it does involve the paranormal. Just as a very quick example, we had a poltergeist disturbance 3 years ago. A mug that was an apport disappeared for 90 odd minutes, appeared in another room. That was analysed.
Wait. What did you just say? Slow down for a second. What materialized and
a mug, a kitchen mug, appeared.
A mug.
Yes,
Okay.
A mug,
Okay.
and reappeared. But we were able to analyze it, and under the microscope, it was not the same mug. It had gone through some very strange diathermic reactions. Now, those diathermic reactions in this mug we'd seen before. We couldn't work out where we'd seen it, and we knew we'd seen it before. And it was in an older document of analysis, which is referred to as biological traumatology to plants. That's when a UFO comes close to the ground and affects the plants on the ground. Mm-hmm. The plants were analysed, and they found exactly the same diathermic reactions in them, which means there's evidence to support that the fact that a manifestation of a mug in a poltergeist case and a manifestation of a UFO may be using the very same physics, which really joins these two phenomena together in some way.
This poltergeist from 3 years ago, was this in your home? You were a witness to it?
This was an investigation that took place in a place called Morecambe, not too far from Blackpool in the UK, where family were having these disturbances. That is when it was the incident took place during the investigation and analysed by Lancaster University.
Okay, so you weren't a witness to it, but you did the investigation.
Oh, no, I was there at the time.
Oh, wait, stop,
yeah.
Steve, stop. Tell me about this. You can't just nonchalantly just lay this out there and let's move on and talk about superconductors. No, no, man. What happened?
I've been involved in the paranormal research quite a lot. I spent 17 years working for corporate companies in the UK. I was the only establishment in the world officially on record to investigate corporate companies' disturbances, and of course that happened a lot. I got called out by private landlords as well, and on this occasion this house, very large house actually, was having these paranormal disturbances, poltergeist infestation, and whilst that investigation, incidents were happening. One of those incidents was an apportation when an object, it was a mug in the kitchen. It had been placed on the side. We were actually going to have a cup of tea, and all of a sudden we turned around and it was gone. It didn't appear till roughly 96 minutes later, in the middle of the carpet in the lounge, which was ridiculous because there's no way we could have missed that. And what was good for us is that we would be able to bench test it against another mug of exactly the same. It was a set of 4.
Right.
And we analysed them. And this particular mug, the apportation, that mug was not the same mug. It looked the same, it weighed the same, it felt the same. Under the microscope, it was not the same. And the reactions, the diathermic reactions that had happened in this mug were very, very strange. But had seen this relevant information before. And when we went through our files, we found it. We found the exact diathermic reactions mentioned in plant traumology when a UFO came close to the ground and affected the area and the plants, those plants were taken and analysed, and the same diathermic reactions were seen in them. So it was seen that the field around and the object associated to the physics of be it the paranormal, a manifestation of a mug, or a manifestation of a UFO might be the principal physics that's involved. And this is an area where research needs to go. It needs to look at these phenomena, not just in the ufological realm, but the paranormal, because ufology first started in the paranormal realm, not in the skies. It started with communication spiritually with entities, and then it got picked up by the Metaphysical Society, which became the Vril Society in the German during the Second World War. Information was gathered then from extraterrestrials, ET contact, those sort of cases. It went on to an experiment known as the Skull experiment, took place in Norfolk in the UK, very famous case where manifestations and communications with ETs took place as well as spiritual communications. And it has always had one foot in the paranormal realm. So we have to say, when we look at the whole picture of the ufological phenomena, that it also represents in the field in the paranormal. And this was known years ago. It was separated purposely. Blue Book officers separated it purposely. They didn't want to hear about all that ghostly stuff. Let's just stick to the facts about the UFO. And in fact, some people were reporting seeing a UFO and then having a spate of paranormal or poltergeist infestation straight after for a week or so. There was connections. There's always seemed to have been some connections between the paranormal and ufological phenomena. And I think that now we can open all these other doors, these areas of research now, and say, let's look at the picture as a whole, not just in ufology. We'll start pushing forward and getting some answers, because I'm hearing people right from the 1960s, be it people from the Defense Intelligence Units in America, these establishments which are investigating UFOs, saying, well, it's about PSI, it's psi phenomena. How much you know about psi phenomena? You need to have a good understanding of that. And then right through, even today, I mean, we've got people who leaked information to the TTSA saying, our guys that were researching UFO phenomena got a little bit edgy because they didn't know if it was something demological or paranormal.
Right.
You've got to consider the whole picture to get forward in this subject. And I think that's the way forward.
I think you explained my missing socks. and there's another element to this, where if we go back, and I'm not this is not a reach, Steve, but if you go back and we talk about trickster entities and, stealing little objects from your house and, the fairies, always misplacing your keys, but then you find them later, these things happen. It's very similar to what you're describing there, except we try to rationalize it in our own mind, right? I just lost them. Maybe if you analyzed your keys once you found them, you'd find that they weren't the same. They just,
maybe.
Right.
It could be. I mean, we do know, and I talked with researcher Grant Cameron, who's very much into this. I mean, we've been in some consistent talks now for over a year with regarding our research on apportations and UFO phenomena. And what we considering here as a section of research is that when apports do take place, you wouldn't be able to identify that apport as an apport. It looks the same, feels the same, weighs the same. How would we know it is? Only under the microscope. But it would seem that paranormal phenomena continues, but weakens and suppresses very quickly once you take the apport out the location. So does the apport, where it comes from somewhere else, cause some type of quantum bridging between our reality and another reality? And this is where we're going. This is all quantum physics and quantum reality, unfortunately. But I think this is the way forward within this subject. I think as soon as we start accepting the fact that we're dealing with something which is seems seemingly metaphysical in nature and constitutes the also paranormal phenomena and PSI, then that's going to open up doorways of new research, because ufologists are going to just have to step out of the comfort zone just a little bit to say, okay, let's look at the paranormal aspects or the psychic ramifications of these experiences. I think that's the way forward. And I think having this project, which we've been working on for such a long time now, traveling around the world and looking at ancient sites which are connected, still actively connected to the phenomena, UFO phenomena, in key locations. This is why it kind of all falls in place, that we will start to see a wider scope as to where to go and investigate and where to push forward. We have new equipment. We have new pieces of software now that can be used. We have new ways of identifying this phenomena and ways to experience it as well, because we know that this phenomena can also generate infrasonics. We know that because its effects on birds and insects, they fall very quiet at the time of manifestation. And there are these wonderful areas of research. We've decided over the last 3 years is to do a new course that will help people push forward into these new areas of research in ufology. And we went to the best people around the world as well, and they've managed to put things together for us, their latest credible details on the subject of ufology, and we ploughed it all into this course known as the UITC, the UFO Investigators Training Course. We recently submitted this to MUFON. We had a meeting with Jan Hazen, and he was very surprised with the actual course and wanted to recommend it by MUFON, which is going to be available in the next couple of weeks. But it's a course that's ongoing because the subject is forever changing and we're ever learning something. So the learning of this subject should never be static. So what we're saying is that though that there is a principal course to study which takes you right from basic to the advanced areas of this research which we are providing now, that there also continues to be free updates and modules going to be given out, because that's what we want to do. We want to take people into new areas so that we're not so static, and so that we're not just getting another photograph and another video, that we are actually coming up with some answers to this.
Yeah, because this is what is interesting, because you brought up a point that physicists on the other side are bringing up the same point. But that is, here in the UFO community, we do need to talk about the interdimensional, the parallel worlds, the alternate reality side of things. The part about this that takes it out of the pure physical side of the UFO hypothesis. And then, but on the other side, the same argument is being put out there by physicists and the scientific community, which is, there are extra dimensions outside of our four with string theory. There are multiple universes. There are parallel worlds. There are alternate realities. There is entanglement, right? And they want us, the world, to understand and believe these concepts that sound like pure science fiction, but they are not. The math says that this is real. Well, if that is the case, then all of the paranormal and the supernatural, no matter what a physicist is going to tell you, all of the spirituality that we're talking about is being proven by the scientific community. We need to get the two of these groups together, man.
Exactly. And that's a way of moving forward, because I don't think we're not going to get any more answers from, all these other people who would come forward with experiences or photograph or, I'm a contactee and so on and so forth. Because it's a hyper-evasive phenomena. It always has been, and it always will be. It's always one step ahead of us. It can read us consciously. We know what we're going to do before we do it. Well, exactly the same things happens in seances. When we sat down with questions, 20 questions to ask, and then we delivered the answers before we've even given the question, because there's a conscious connection. It's no surprise that people experience sleep deprivation and paralysis during these experiences in the paranormal. when a dark figure appears in a bedroom, or a shadow figure, or be it UFOs or aliens turn up, or small beings and lights coming through the window. These phenomena are seemingly one of the same. They're just it seems to have a different mask, and the phenomena has been showing these different masks through different times. The further we go back, the mask changes, the name changes. They be it from the aliens to to the fairies, to the daemons and the demons and the archons and the jinn. You can call them what you will, but they seemingly are one of the same thing.
That's right.
The same powers.
No question about that. And I find this, really, really exciting. But where is the information for UITC?
The UITC course is going to be going up on the MUFON website store within the next couple of weeks. First time available under special offer. But this is it's an ongoing thing, because what we're saying to people is that this is a starting point. This is a 300-page glossy magazine. Well, it's a glossy book, and it's a resource thing that they can take with them. They can apply right from the beginning of it being interested in the subject to advanced studies. It tells you where to go and how to get it, where to get the software which you can utilize. You can tap into satellites orbiting Earth, which are constantly measuring gravitational anomalies and magnetic anomalies. And the evidence points to the phenomena of UFOs are utilizing magnetic anomalies, positive magnetic fields in certain locations. There have been since as long as we know. Philip Corso first mentioned it in 1982, said that the US government were looking into 5 major positive magnetic regions where UFO activity is taking place. This is still going on now. The government are aware of it. The US government, I assure you, are aware of it, but they're keeping it quiet. But we have the capabilities of looking now and saying, okay, let's look at all the major past incidents. We looked at 2,000 major UFO incidents over the last, say, 60, 70 years, and they're in positive magnetic regions. That's not by chance, that those are happening in these key locations. And it's also interesting to point out that these magnetic anomalies are not just here on planet Earth, but they're also around the sun and the moon as well. So we see a lot of activity from the sun. Maybe this phenomena just are star jumpers. Maybe they use magnetic anomalies to get from one place to the other.
We're figuring it out. I can't wait until some of these breakthroughs happen, because when it does, all of that poltergeist stuff that people have been investigating, like yourself, or ghosts, near-death experiences, these other worlds, all of it is related, Steve, and it's all going to be solved, I think, at the same time. And I cannot believe we went through 2.5 hours and did not talk about Phenomena Magazine. I cannot believe it.
Well,
you are the CEO of Phenomena Magazine. You've got almost 2 million readers around the world, and it's a great publication. And please tell everybody where they can go and check it out.
Absolutely, yeah. They can go to phenomenamagazine.co.uk. The magazine is free. You can download it at the end of every month. Also, there's a back issues section there. You can go back and get every other single magazine that's ever been created. And we are probably about 15, 16 years in now. But it is distributed in 12 countries under 4 languages at this moment in time. We're still looking to expand it. But it's about networking, and it's about freely giving out information and keeping everybody in touch with what's going on around the world.
You're the best, Steve. Give my best to Jackie. Tell Vitaly I've got a great haberdasher that I can put him in touch with there in London. And we're going to be seeing you guys very, very soon over in the United Kingdom. And I can't be more excited than the way I feel right now. It's going to be great. Thank you so much, Steve, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Wonderful. It's an absolute pleasure, Jimmy. Thanks again.
Steve Mera, live from the United Kingdom. And I'm not playing around. If you want to check me out when I jump up on stage and say, hello, Manchester, you got to be there. It is June 26th through the 27th, 2020 in Manchester. AwakeningUFO.com. We've got the links up in social media. We've got it up over on our website, and it's going to be a tremendous event. And like I said, Eric Von Daniken, Richard Dolan, Nick Pope, Grant Cameron, Billy Carson, Laura Eisenhower. It's going to be an amazing weekend. So come on out and hang out with Rita and I, and you'll be able to see Theta Rex for the first time over in Europe. With that, I'm going to get out of here. Tomorrow night
is Fader Night. It is open lines all night long. My favorite night of the week. Well, besides tonight with Steve Mera. I am your host, Jimmy Church. What a great conversation tonight. Thank you, Steve Mera. He's the best. Faded Black's executive producers Rita Camarion. Show is produced by Hilton J. Palm, Renee, Dennis, and Bob. Announcers are Steve Harder, Gene Vitoa, Mark D. Kovar. Webmaster is Drew the Geek. Music, Doug Aldrich. Happy birthday, Doug. Intro, Spaceboy, spaceboymusic.com. Syndication is KGRA The Planet. Fade to Black is produced by KJCR for the Game Changer Network. This broadcast is only copyrighted 2020 by Fade to Black and the Game Changer Network, Inc. It cannot be rebroadcast, downloaded, copied, or used anywhere in the known universe without written permission from Fade to Black or the Game Changer Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Tomorrow night's Fader Night. It's Thursday. Until then, I want everybody to be safe. Go Beckley Teppy.